This is Mark Goldberg with the UN Affairs blog UN Dispatch.
And this is Matthew Lee from Inner City Press at the UN.
So big news this week, Matthew.
There's been a lot of news. Yeah, it's been a lot
of news. Maybe the big news of the week, of course, is the sort of precedent-setting, shattering International Criminal Court in sort of action against the president of Sudan, Omar el-Bashir.
Sure. Yeah. No. On Monday, Luis Moreno Ocampo, the prosecutor, he'd pretty much telegraphed the move, so everybody knew it was coming down the pike. But he's made a request. Again, I think sometimes it gets slightly misreported that he has indicted Bashir. He's made a request to the judges of the ICC to grant him an indictment and arrest warrant.
Right.
Most people are saying if the past is any guide, it'll take some weeks. And in fact, I was just talking to somebody. Probably they won't act on that until after this year's General Assembly meeting of all world leaders.
It's meant to, because essentially, right, it's an application to a panel of judges.
Yep.
He's asking the judges to grant him an arrest warrant, essentially, and that's supposed to take a couple months for them to go over the evidence, for the judges to go over the evidence.
It's strange. I mean, he's here today. Actually, I just came out of a press conference with this is the 10th anniversary of the Rome Statute that set up the International Criminal Court. Yeah. So he came for that, and obviously, I mean, the press room was filled because everyone wanted to ask him about this indictment of Bashir. He sort of was very coy and said, "I will not describe to you my evidence. I will describe it to the judges." And then when asked, which is the other question that everyone is asking, is because there's a lot of moves afoot to actually they're not moves afoot. There's discussions of where this all leads. Are some members wanting to suspend the indictments? Mm-hmm. What's the effect of the indictments on, for example, the two peacekeeping missions or the quote-unquote peace process? I mean, that's obviously we can, and he really didn't get into that. He said, I'm just a prosecutor. You have to ask others.
Well, that's like the right answer, right?
It is, except
what else can he say?
I'll cut to the chase here, so we can get into the real the meat that blogging is known for.
Go for it.
He says that publicly, but the behind-the-scenes scuttlebutt here is that if now belatedly Bashir were to somehow turn over the two previous and outstanding indictees, Harun and Ali Kushib, that somehow this could all be worked out. It seems very strange to me because, and seriously, this is something that's both being floated by, let's say, to put it diplomatically, Western ambassadors, and they say from Ocampo himself. So it seems very strange.
So you're saying that the real game here is that Ocampo's decision to indict Bashir was to give sort of the prosecutor leverage over Sudan handing over two sort of underlings that have already been
I agree with
indicted by the court.
It seems
a little bizarre on the part of a camp. It seems like that might be sort of the easy way out, I think, for many, as you say, Western diplomats. Mm-hmm. That's sort of like the easy route. But I imagine that it's, I feel like Ocampo has, to a degree, staked his credibility on indicting Bashir. He's in the headlines right now. And it seems that this is like sort of a weird thing for the prosecutor to be floating. Not so weird.
I totally agree. And I think
Western diplomats to be floating.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they emerged from meetings with him saying that that's what the discussion is. It is strange. He definitely has. I'm going to, because I sense how I don't want to prejudge your approach to the issue, but I'll say this in terms of his reputation. On the one hand, I think that people that believe in all that is right and good and international justice and end to impunity.
You say that with such.
I say it with some rancor because you'll see where I'm going with that. I'm in favor of all those things, but it's important how you accomplish them. I think there's another analysis that says if you really look at it, Ocampo has not yet actually convicted anyone. The first thing that came to trial was Lubanga, and the case has been suspended because he didn't share the evidence with the defense. His first indictee is a guy, Joseph Kony, from northern Uganda, Lord's Resistance Army, who's never been arrested. And so it seems strange to some to kind of ratchet it up to the point where you now seek an indictment of the sitting president of Sudan before you've actually jailed anyone. And I think the tagline to this is he may be a left-wing Rudy Giuliani. So you see what I mean? The reference being Rudy Giuliani got these convictions and made a lot of noise, and most of the things fell apart. And in fact, at the end of the whole process, you had to say, this is when he was a prosecutor, not as mayor, what was accomplished. Okay. Now,
I think a closer parallel to Ocampo, not Giuliani, would be someone like Richard Goldstone or Carla Del Ponte, who were the prosecutors of the ICTY, the Yugoslav
they actually
Tribunal,
accomplished a few things.
And Rwanda. Right, but
sure.
early on, and keep in mind that the court is only 3 years old. Or pardon me, it was...
They were throwing 6 around. The number they were throwing here was 6. They said 10-year statute, 6-year court.
Its statute starts... It can prosecute crimes committed since 2002, but it opened its doors in 2003. So it's 5 years old, essentially.
Okay.
And a lot of the early time was spent building staff and all that. So really, it's very early in its prosecutorial stage.
Maybe a little too early to indict a president?
At a similar stage...
Right.
The ICTY, the Yugoslav Tribunal, and the Rwanda Tribunal also were at a stage where they hadn't really prosecuted that many people. Especially the ICTY spent a lot of time early on prosecuting really low-level people, and frankly, sort of wasted its time on low-level people to start with.
But you build up a certain track record
that
I think would...
the ICC is not making this sort of mistake. But that means that these cases are complicated and they take sort of like a long time to build.
But you don't see there's anything to the argument of actually like I'll give an example. I just asked Ocampo to explain Lubanga, what his explanation of that case being suspended and fallen apart for what's really. See, here's maybe it's looking. Most people, if you didn't like the prosecutor, the idea that they didn't share the evidence with the defense would be viewed as in any case it's an error by a prosecutor, right? But that's kind of a serious thing. But nobody cares. Maybe it's because people don't care about the Congo, or because this is just a more high-profile prosecution. Mm-hmm. But it seems important, that if you really believe in the court, these things make a difference. You know what I mean? If you're interested in, the headline of, ICC indicts Bashir, one of these guys actually, I don't know if it was the ambassador of Liechtenstein or the foreign minister of Costa Rica, both of whom, one is the outgoing, one is the incoming head of the state parties of the ICC. Yeah. They said this is the best, literally, they used the phrase, this is the best creation of humankind ever, the ICC.
Okay.
Do you agree?
The best creation, sort of better than the
He literally
or
meant it,
fire.
This is like the flower. This is the flower of civilization.
I think it's sort of a part of it's an important moment in human progress that a permanent war crimes court has taken action against a head of state accused of genocide. I think that's sort of a very historic.
I don't know if they were referring to
moment
Bashir. I'm sorry, they meant the court generally, but I see what you're saying. No, I don't know why. I'm just hyping it up.
At the same time, it's. I think I'm sort of interested to see sort of your take on sort of how the UN has responded to sort of the sort of ICC action against Bashir. Because sort of the two kind of two arguments that are sort of made against indicting Bashir is that it would somehow disrupt the peace process and put UNAMID, the peacekeeping force in Darfur, in greater danger than they already were because of sort of repercussions and reprisal attacks against UNAMID by the government of Sudan.
Or just being ordered out of the country. I mean, I think that many people here were discussing that that he hasn't done it now because he's not yet indicted. A request has been made.
Yeah.
But, all I will say on that, and just factually, the UN always, whenever you ask the UN, why aren't you stopping, these terrible acts, whether it's in Darfur or elsewhere, or why are you agreeing to all this, slow entry, whether it's in Myanmar or, again, in Darfur, they always say we only operate with the consent of the member states. Yeah. We can't do anything without the consent. So I don't think it's not a crazy thought that when the leader, whatever you want to say to them, of a country is accused of genocide and put on and an arrest warrant is out for him by what's viewed, although it technically isn't, as a UN affiliated court, that you might lose that consent. I don't think that's crazy. Ban Ki-moon has now said, he's very upset by any attempt to link the peacekeeping missions with this indictment, but I think that's a kind of, you can say that, but they themselves always say they're only there with consent, so why wouldn't you lose consent?
Well, I think that the argument
I'm not saying you should,
though,
I'm just saying you might.
The argument I think to make here is that there is no sort of peace process in Darfur to speak of, There hasn't been for a long time.
I thought you liked Jan Eliasson and Salim Salim.
Those you referenced to a AU and a former UN sort of peace negotiator, and they both sort of resigned their posts because there really sort of was no progress towards peace, and there was no peace process to speak
and largely
of.
just.
So I'm just saying. I think those who argue, and by those I'll reference Andrew Natsios, who's a former U.S. Envoy to Sudan, who wrote in, I believe it was sort of the Social Science Research Council's blog, that this action by the ICC was detrimental towards peace in Darfur and was going to make things a lot worse. I mean, I think the point to make is there is no peace of which to speak. And what this sort of prosecution does, what the ICC action does, is give the international community just this additional point of leverage over the government of Sudan, over Bashir, which they didn't have before.
Except it's only leverage if you admit that you're willing to trade it away, right? That's how it's leverage. But they're never going to admit that.
And I happen to be of the opinion that it's worth trading away if peace is at the sort of end of the tunnel. I'm sure that's probably something the prosecutor would disagree with, but and sort of how it gets traded away is through a vote by the Security Council.
But then you have this problem of impunity. How is it a credible court if the purpose of the indictment is to trade it away?
I agree, it's a trade-off.
Then it really is a political court, right? It's a court that generates indictments.
It's a point I've been making for a long time. It is a political court, but its sort of political targets are people that commit genocide in the third world, and not sort of American presidents.
One correction. Not throughout the third world. Thus far, all of its indictments have been in Africa.
Yes.
Only Africa only.
This is true.
And I actually asked Ocampo that. Right? I mean, whatever. I don't mean to be. I'm sorry to be a little self-centered. I'm just thinking. I wanted to ask him this, so I did. And he was very. He said he tried to play it off like it's not. There was that it's not his fault. He said, "Well, I respect African leaders. I'm working with Africa and for Africa." He said, "I could have just." He said when he first came in, this is what he just said. He said he's supposed to choose situations as to gravity, and actually, Sudan was not on his list. The first three cases that in his own mind, based on gravity, he chose were Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Northern Uganda. Mm-hmm. He says the reason he's never brought a prosecution in Colombia is that there's a national process there. So what he does is go over, and he claims he went there in November, he's going to go there again next month, and he monitors the process. But the reason, but in Africa, he said, in Congo and Northern Uganda, there were no national processes. He says, and this was, I thought, the key quote, I found it sort of interesting. He said, because he respects African leaders so much, he asked the presidents of Congo and Uganda to refer the case to him, and they did. And he said, and this proves that he's. I think he thought that the question of Africa only means he's somehow anti-Africa. Mm-hmm. But I think the question is, is it a universal court if you're only dealing with one continent? And why only that continent? Is it because it's a more chaotic continent? I guess, and that's the implication of that there's no national process, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean that's the point. That sort of the rule of law in places like the Congo and Northern Uganda are not. They're just not there. There's reason it's not. There's not in South Africa or Ghana. Has
there been a big rule of law in Iraq in the last?
Well, Iraq is not a member of the ICC, and so it's out of the ICC's jurisdiction.
Right.
And so
although some might want to refer
the Security Council to refer the situation to Iraq. Incidentally, the prosecutor has sort of rejected, out of hand, sort of investigations in Iraq.
Why?
Why? Because Iraq is not party to the ICC and he has no jurisdiction.
No, sure. Well, I thought you were saying that he may have said something beyond that. But the other, and just to get it on the table, the critique that people make, and maybe it was a compromise made during the Rome Statute, is that it's true. I mean, another country that comes to mind is, for example, Myanmar, of which many people said they were committing a crime against humanity by blocking humanitarian access, and totally outside of the cyclone is a country which ruthlessly oppresses its own people, including the ethnic minority that it tries to wipe out, right?
Yeah.
So but they're not a party.
Well, so what happened in Sudan? Sudan is also not a party of the ICC, but in March 2005, the Security Council voted to authorize the International Criminal Court to have jurisdiction over alleged crimes in Darfur. That's sort of what opened the can of worms of what we're seeing now. That it took sort of the Security Council, in my opinion, to its great credit, decided to take a chance and give the prosecutor authority to investigate crimes in a non-ICC member state.
Right. I think right.
Yeah, no, and so I think this just getting back to this sort of the sort of on the ground consequences of this action. I think it's important to we talked about this just a moment ago, but the Security Council can choose to suspend ICC proceedings for a year at a time, and it requires sort of a vote and no vetoes from any of the permanent five. Yep. So there is this opportunity now for the Security Council to wield some leverage over Bashir and over Sudan to dangle the prospect of suspending the ICC process for Khartoum's credible commitment to sort of peace and to implementing probably the Comprehensive Peace Accord, which would mandate elections happen in 2009. And frankly, those elections, if they were held today, would likely result in Bashir's ouster.
Which is another, just to go factually, that's part of Natsios' argument, but there's also some other Sudan experts, etc., that say one of the problems of the indictment is that there was a sort of a natural process leading up to the election in which Bashir may have lost and left power. But now, once I'm sure you've heard this argument that by creating this indictment, it makes it less likely that either the election will be held, that it'll leave voluntarily. It kind of takes off the table this kind of like leave in peace. I'm not actually a proponent of that.
I guess from what I read from, say, like the International Crisis Group, that they seem to think that sort of Bashir has been manipulating the process leading up to the election and arming groups against other groups to sort of shift the demography of Sudan in his favor for the election, and that the South will sort of secede anyway. Interesting. So, any final thoughts on Ocampo at the ICC at the UN today?
No. I think here's another, and I guess rather than pontificate, just the factual. What's been kind of interesting is that has been, like the Secretary General. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but earlier in the process, when he went to visit Ban Ki-moon, went to Sudan, people were saying to him, "Are you even going to bring up this issue of Harun and Kushib, the two indictees?" Yeah. And he was very cagey and was very. I think people perceived him as not really being in favor of the court, and for good. I was there when he gave these evasive answers or non-answers, and so people were saying he's not that concerned with the justice side. He wants to sort of see if he can bring about peace and sort of look eye to eye, and this would be a big feather in his cap. What's been interesting in the days just before and after the Ocampo's move on Monday is he's tried to go out of his way to say he claims he was misperceived when he said he's concerned about the effect of the indictment on the peacekeeping mission. Yeah. Some interpreted this as he's not that committed to the ICC. See what I mean? Obviously it's a politically charged issue. So to make that connection, made it appear that he was somehow saying, and Sudan asked to speak with him, and I talked the Sudanese ambassador on Friday went to speak with the Secretary General and according to him, pointed at him and said, "We hold you responsible for the indictment," and made some mention of the peacekeeping mission because over the weekend Ban Ki-moon called President Bashir, and then his office issued a little readout saying he expressed deep concern about the permanent representative of Sudan's statement linking the peacekeeping missions to the indictment.
Because it seems to be a direct threat. Because keep in mind, the same peacekeeping mission suffered a huge loss.
There were seven were killed on 8th of July, and one more since then. Yep.
Yeah, so right before the announcement of the sort of ICC action, there was this terrible attack that killed 7 UN peacekeepers. Yep. In Darfur. It was like a really pretty huge setback. Sure. Frankly, for the mission.
It seems pretty important to actually get to the bottom of who did that. And I'm not trying to be naive. I think it's quite possible that either the government or Janjaweed forces did it, but it's also not impossible that rebel forces did it. I'm just saying it's not impossible. One of the questions that came up today to Ocampo was whether he is in fact investigating like Haskanita or other potential abuses by rebels. That's somebody asked him.
What did he say? What was his
answer? Said, he said, "You know me, I investigate everything," but I don't actually know him, and I don't know him to be doing that. I think since we're still in Ocampo, one of the problems is, like, in each of these conflicts, he's sort of, and it's not to try to have there be moral equivalence, but, for example, in Uganda, despite how bad the Lord's Resistance Army is, that recruited child soldiers and cut off hands and did horrendous things, there are many people that say the Ugandan army itself has committed war crimes in northern Uganda. It's sort of but that's why I found Ocampo's response that, it somehow showed his respect for Africa that he managed to get the president of Uganda, Museveni, to make the referral. Well, once you get the referral in that way, it's highly unlikely you're going to turn the tables and investigate the referee. Is that what I mean? Yeah. And the same thing has happened in the Congo. This Security Council trip. Here, I'll do a little travel name dropping. With the Security Council of Africa last month, the president of the.
Hello, Matthew.
Yeah.
We seem to have lost Matthew.
What happened?
Let me.
Hang on.
Let me give him a call back. Maybe we can edit this part out.
Hello. Mark. Mark?
Calling Matthew.
Hello, Mark.
Hey, sorry, I don't know the call seemed to. I don't know the call seemed to drop there.
I don't know what happened.
Hopefully they'll edit this part out.
Okay.
So I'm still recording.
Yeah, sure. I didn't stop either.
Okay.
That could have been.
So when I lost you, you're about to say something about the Congo.
Oh, the same thing. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Let's start from there.
All right. No, and it's just that it's sort of an obvious point, but that when he got the referral from Joseph Kabila, the president of the Congo, and the reality is now Kabila is extreme. He praised, effusively both the court and the UN, although the two are supposedly not connected, right?
Yeah.
And the Security Council for the indictments they brought, but they're all against his political opponents. So it's sort of, I guess again, I don't want to be, it's not to be a nitpicker, but I think that there are legitimate questions about the court's first 6 years. And I think it's hard to admit that there aren't, but it's sort of, it seems like rather, I have yet to hear a kind of any kind of either recalcitrance or like, how do you solve the problem that your first prosecution falls apart for not sharing evidence with the defense?
Yeah.
Seems like there should be an answer, but again, it's one of these kind of like political litmus tests. You're either for the ICC or against it. You know what I mean?
Now, didn't you say that sort of the case fell apart, but didn't the sort of ICC registry, the judges, didn't they reinstate the case?
They decided not to release him pending their consideration of the error of not sharing with the defense. So that is true.
Okay.
But it hasn't been reinstated. And actually, here I can say a little bit of reporting. I can say that the people in the evidence at issue was very kind of preliminary information that the UN Secretariat and its peacekeeping mission in the Congo gave to the prosecutor. I've heard from them that they were surprised that Ocampo based his prosecution on this information. They say that they turned it over thinking this was the type of preliminary information that he would use to develop better and more strong evidence, and that would be what he'd share with the other side. But in fact, according to them, they're kind of, I don't want to say that they're critical of him, they're pissed because they gave this information they don't want it disclosed. But they thought they didn't provide it, they didn't think that what they were providing was strong enough to actually bring a case. Do you see what I mean? And this is, I guess, I'm trying to say that it's this kind of thing, like it's not in these UN people's interest to question or undermine the International Criminal Court, but they have their own questions. And all I'm saying, it doesn't mean like it's a terrible thing, but I think that it's such a kind of political football or litmus test. Like, it's the best thing that was ever created. Maybe it will be, but it's important that it do a good job. And I guess I'm not, not to be a naysayer or anything, but right now I don't see the evidence of doing that good a job. There may be good intentions.
Well, if you look at again, it's a new organization, but you look at sort of the political effects it has had. At least if you look at sort of the situation in northern Uganda, there was a civil war there going on 20 years. It had reached pretty much a perpetual stalemate. Yet they were never quite able to secure peace. It wasn't until, frankly, the ICC opened proceedings that movement, that momentum towards a peace process began. That peace has so far proved elusive, but they came pretty much as close as they ever had. Just a couple months ago to getting the LRA on board a peace agreement.
I don't want to disagree with that, although people now say it's in fact the indictment that's the main stumbling block from because as you know there have been LRA incursions into South Sudan, into Congo, even in Central African Republic. But the other thing is also, just to be a smartass, I mean, maybe the ICC can claim credit for the FARC running out of juice. The FARC is falling apart in Colombia, the rebel group. But obviously that has nothing to do with the ICC. I think that there's an analysis that would just say the LRA ran out of steam. You know what I mean? Right. You can only kidnap children and make them, kill adults for so long, and it didn't work. But I think
the big question we'll see is sort of how this Bashir situation will play out. Right? It
don't
right
you think
now
that's? I think it's
they're serving the international. They're serving sort of the international community up with a big sort of stick with which to prod Bashir towards peace.
I guess
depending on how sort of the Security Council plays its cards, it might work out in sort of in favor of peace.
Right. I guess
it might bring Bashir to the bargaining table, where he previously had not sort of sat in good fashion in
right. I guess and it's a very limited point. And I sort of feel like it's they needed to not that Bashir doesn't deserve it or what have you, but this court needed to get a couple of accomplishments under its belt. Do you know what I mean? It just seems kind of like it's like said
Again,
I don't know.
I think that one of the big mistakes, and we talked about this earlier, is that the ICTY, the Yugoslav Tribunal, made early on. Was that you had this institution with a bunch of judges there that people are paying money into, that with prosecutors and judges sitting around doing nothing, so they decide to go after just a bunch of low-level people. Sure, they got sort of convictions under their belt, but in the end, it was pretty much a big waste of time and money. The sort of prosecutions of these low-level people were not something that the ICTY would have gone after at the end of its sort of career. It was only going after high-level people, and it should have only go after high-level people. And I think it's a credit to Ocampo that he's exercised the patience, right, of
I would
wasting
disagree.
his time.
I don't see this as patient. I don't think jumping
with sort of the sort of lower-level folk.
Right. I don't really see this as patient. Actually, I'll say this: that I think that if anything, he was sort of maybe he sees the kind of I think that I remember when he came, I think it was in September, and he said, I'm going to go higher than Haroon. People thought what would he do is he'd shoot for maybe like the Ministry of Defense. He'd go above but short of the president. I think that something in his mind clicked. And I know that there are people that believe like Bashir is terrible, so it's great. He should have done it from day one. The guy is horrendous. All I want to say, I think this going right to the top is a mark of kind of impatience, and I think he's
But now,
Matthew,
he didn't start at the top. He indicted two people 2 years ago.
And sort of in a fit of pique because the government didn't turn them over. Then he said, "Let me indict the president." But the thing is here, and again, go ahead.
He followed the evidence where it led.
But then let's hear about the evidence. Here's what I find disingenuous about him. He's a master of playing the press. He let the press know. His office provides leaks all the time, saying this is what he was going to do. Right? I mean, here's the other thing. He could have done this under seal if he actually wanted to arrest him. Right? This is it's a media strategy. That's why I found his answer today. I'm not going to discuss the evidence with you. That's not acceptable. It's maybe technically correct, right? But it seems to me like you're indicting a sitting president. I want to hear the evidence. It's not like I disbelieve it.
Well, wait a second. You just made a huge charge there that the reason he decided to not use a sealed indictment was sort of his vanity, right? That's essentially what you just.
No, I'm saying they bring sealed indictments. They did it to Bemba.
Hold on. The political effect of a sealed indictment is not the same as the political effect.
But he's the one that says it's not political.
Indictment,
Mark, he's the one that says it's not political. He insists that it's not political. He insists that he's not doing this to gain leverage. He insists he's just following the evidence. I'm telling you, you admit that it's political. He does not. Which is why with Bemba, who's
he might not. But listen. I don't think you can just accuse him of his sort of being vain is why he decided to not use a sealed indictment. I mean, it's a totally different strategy, right? And sort of the advantage in this case of an unsealed, open case is that again it gives the Security Council leverage over which to press Bashir to make encouraging signs and enter good faith negotiations towards peace.
I'm just saying
that would not have been accomplished if Bashir was just sort of arrested on a trip somewhere.
Given that he insists that the court is not political and that the request for the indictment is not meant to have a political effect, that's why I'm saying it. And at the same time that he's doing this, he did a sealed indictment against this guy Jean-Pierre Bemba, the number 2 guy of the Congo. He kept it sealed until the guy was arrested. Then he released it. Then he said,
right.
Right. So
it's a different situation.
I mean, I guess you just seem to
sort of strategy.
Right.
You know?
But let's play this out, because it goes back to the Uganda thing. I mean, I guess I just want to say, if in reality, there's no question that creating a court that has the leverage to lock up and put on trial, whether warlords or sitting presidents accused of genocide, creates a leverage. It's great. But deep down, if in fact the end game of these cases, as has happened in Uganda, is essentially to trade it away for peace, how do you then remain saying with a straight face, there's no impunity, it's not a political court, it's just following the evidence? Because eventually, you trade it away.
I think if you look at sort of the 2 historical examples, right, of when heads of state have been tried for war crimes,
yep.
You have, by an international court, you have Slobodan Milosevic and Charles Taylor, right? In both those cases, the Liberia in Charles Taylor's case and Serbia in Milosevic's case are much more peaceful places now than they were before they were brought to justice.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm not a fan. I'm not a critic of international justice. I don't know if I guess you see nothing. You think, you see nothing to the idea that Ocampo, even by its own terms, I don't know. We'll see how it works out.
Well, right. I mean, impunity. I mean, it depends sort of, I guess, what you mean by impunity. Mm-hmm. If the sort of, I'm willing to live with the trade-off that Bashir never sees the inside of a courtroom. Mm-hmm. If he is, if sort of Sudan becomes a more peaceful place, if there's a peace deal that works in Darfur and he signs on to it in good faith. Mm-hmm. That will probably, in this sort of Sudan-specific situation,
sure.
that will probably include a set of elections, or and which will likely include Bashir's ouster.
But let's
so
say
one way or another, this sort of this moment, this indictment, even if he doesn't see the inside of a courtroom, might end up leading to his ouster.
But check
and I'm
this out.
saying that may
sure.
not be sort of courtroom justice, but at least he's sort of dislodged from his bully pulpit.
But as you know, he already committed, not for what it's worth, whether maybe people believe it or don't believe it. Absent the indictment, he already committed to a process and to an election. Now there's the indictment. If he ends up not holding the election, are you willing to say maybe the indictment, rebounded the wrong way?
I would disagree.
No,
with
you
the
would say regardless
of your question, saying that
sure.
he actually committed to this election process. He might have signed along the dotted lines, but I think the actions he's taken are not sort of indicative of someone who's committed to an election.
So if it doesn't happen.
Right. But sorry, maybe we wanted to switch topics.
Sure. No. Let's shift. Before we leave the topic of Darfur. Here's something you didn't know that I'm going to read.
Do tell.
There was and I think it's right on UN Plaza topic. There was the Secretary General he put out one of these. I mean, actually, I think we can show it. Put out a report. Well, this has notes on it, but put out a report about the UNAMID and Darfur this week in advance of a Security Council meeting they had this week, where they're talking about renewing the mandate of the peacekeeping mission in Darfur.
Yeah.
And here's a sample sentence. A major support issue that will have significantly negative impact on UNAMID deployment relates to the commercial contractor which is constructing accommodations and other critical infrastructure for the operation. The contractor is far behind schedule and has not performed as expected. The contractor is Lockheed Martin.
This is your story.
I guess what I'm saying is that now the question becomes, that is the U.S.-based military contractor Lockheed Martin, which the UN gave a no-bid $250 million contract to for just this work. And when asked directly why he bent or broke the UN's rules on competition for procurement, Ban Ki-moon said, because they are the only ones who can do it. They're on the ground. We had to. And now it turns out they didn't perform. They've been paid 90% of the money. I'm not at all. The question now arises, are you going to get paid back? It was announced today, actually, that a Chinese contingent is being sent, of engineers, is being sent to sort of complete what Lockheed was supposed to have done in Nyala, building a super camp.
Yeah.
And it's not at all clear that the UN is going to get any money back. So I don't want to, maybe I'm saying this to say I told you so. I guess I just wonder, how does it, I don't know. Push back
you can
somehow.
just say it. You can just
tell
say
me.
I told you so. That's fine.
Okay, all right. We can move on. Next
yeah,
topic.
there you go.
No, but it is. I mean, now that question is,
you can say it.
Got to get that money back. I'm surprised. It's actually to their credit that they put it in there. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
like paragraph 37. It was like really like they slipped it in there. But it's pretty amazing, given the things that were said publicly about. About why they had to be given the no bid contract. That this is by their own admission the result.
Yeah.
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 And I think it's also, I mean, again, when you go through this report, there's a couple of other things. I mean, anyway, we can move off Sudan, but it also does talk about child soldier recruitment by the Justice and Equality movement. And I also want to say, here's a funny, again, it's not to, I just think there's been a quote this week after the indictment. We have to stick one more thing on the indictment. After the indictment, the Justice and Equality movement was quoted as saying, "This is great, and rest assured, we are going to assault Khartoum again." And there's been no response. I actually asked, if not to carry anyone's water, does the UN have any response? We're still studying the statement. So here's the other. All I want to say is, and I'm not wishing that this indictment doesn't work out well, but I think you've set it up in such a way that, like, if he doesn't have the election now, he wouldn't have done it anyway. Like, there's no. Let's agree. Let's set out some benchmarks so that I can say I told you so in a couple of months. Ready?
Or I could say I told you so.
No, I agree. No, I'm just I'm joking. I'm joking and saying it that way. But I'm saying, one of the something that not just Sudan, and I understand they're obviously their representative here is very self-interested, but some people have said doing it this way makes actual peace talks between whether it's GEM or other rebel groups in the government less likely, because it creates. It emboldens them. I mean, I don't know. All I can say is, objectively, the indictment was announced, and the next quote from GEM is, "Yahoo! See you in Omdurman, Khartoum." Right? Yeah. So again, I don't really mean to. And I think the other thing is that, and people may know this, and they may have no respect for either China or Russia, but 2 of the permanent 5 are against this indictment. They're pretty much said that.
Yeah.
And I think I would go further than that. And again, many of our viewers, and maybe both of us, think, well, the UN is a General Assembly is a sinkhole is not the highest flower of human civilization. But I think if you had a vote in the General Assembly today, whether this indictment is a good thing or not, more than 50% of countries would say it's not. And I say that based on that the African Union has spoken against it, the Arab League, and again, maybe these are all just clubs of thugs. I don't know, but I always heard that, number one, that the UN is run in a democratic way. And I think, number 2, more realistically, not just to be a smartass, that the proponents of all that is right and good, and I'm referring in that to, on the permanent 5, the U.S., the U.K., and France, they're supposed to convince other countries to come to their side. They're not supposed to jump out ahead or shove things down people's throat because they have a veto. They're supposed to engage in diplomacy to accomplish at least some part of all that is right and good. And this is the transition to talk about the double veto of sanctions on Robert Mugabe, which failed, right?
Yes.
What
was so shocking about that, to me at least, is that sort of at the G8 summit, the week before the vote, all G8 members, Russia most prominently, signed on to a statement essentially backing sanctions against members of the Mugabe regime, right?
I think Russia makes Russia says the wording was very important, and that they're saying they're not just playing word games. That people knew it when they passed it. That the G8 statement did not refer to Security Council action.
Well, apparently
so,
no one bothered to tell U.S. permanent representative Zalmay Khalilzad, right? Because literally, sort of the next day, and you were probably at this press stakeout.
It was incredible, yeah.
Yeah, he said we have the votes to go ahead with the sanctions with the U.S. sponsored sanctions package against Zimbabwe, which is essentially an arms embargo and individual targeted sanctions against, I think, something like 13 top members of the Mugabe regime.
Mm-hmm.
So
plus
he announced it and said, we can have a vote by the end of the week. And so I was thrilled. I was typing on UN Dispatch how great this is, that we're finally going to have all these sanctions. And lo and behold, the vote comes, and Russia and China veto.
Both veto. Yep. No, that's exactly it. They misread it. I mean, there's no... Objectively, you have to say... I think what a lot of... Just to kind of jump forward into the politics of it, once... The analysis that many people gave to it was that China might have been expected to veto, but this was the analysis that many people were floating. Mm-hmm. Might have thought, given... They tried to ship weapons to Mugabe. They're generally against sanctions. But because of the Olympics, maybe they wouldn't want to veto. They certainly wouldn't want to veto if they stood alone. And the idea was people just sort of I think they didn't pay attention to Russia, both the wording of the G8 thing, and they just didn't. In a way, Russia's pissed because they're not being taken seriously. And Kosovo is the example, right? That's an example where a P5 member said, "You better not do this. You're breaking the law," and everybody said, "Screw you. We don't need a vote."
So the idea here with this vote is that Russia just gave China cover. Russia did China a big favor by vetoing.
But here's the thing: it's a misreading. One of the I'm going to have to be very artful in this. One of the well-meaning P5 ambassadors briefed the press off the record and said exactly that. Our only worry here is China. Russia's doesn't really have economic interest there. We're not worried about them. But that was a mistake. But the thing that really amazed everybody is that I think a lot of, and this is maybe the one sort of reporting thing we can bring to the table here, is that it wasn't, although as I went up to the cheap seats of the Security Council, because this is one you wanted to see the vote, and it literally was the people that went to watch it on UN TV, they missed it because you don't see the two arms going up at once of the double veto. There was only 3 people in the audience actually, because nobody goes there. It literally is broken chairs and the kind of the balcony area, but it's the first they called the pro vote, so there was 9, and everyone said, okay, there's going to be 9. The idea would have been that Russia and China were going to abstain, which would have allowed it to go through. Then they called the no votes, and suddenly you look, and there's the 2 arms up. But it was a surprise to us, but it was not a surprise to Khalilzad, Soares, and Repair, the ambassadors of the Western P5s.
So they knew ahead of time.
Because they step in, this is the nitty-gritty of it all, is before they go into the chamber, they go into their little consultation room, and they go around, and they say, how are you going to vote? They do that so they don't get embarrassed. That's why they always say, consistent with our prior consultations. So the surprising thing, and literally, it was very tense and kind of exciting. The Chinese ambassador went in that day, and everyone's sort of pushing up against these steel barricades and saying, "How are you going to vote?" And he said, "It is difficult for China. It is extremely difficult," which a lot of us laughed about because his voice even cracked a little bit. It was almost like he was going to cry. Then some people thought he was joking with us. Anyway, it was one of those inscrutable, is it difficult to veto? Is it difficult because you want to veto and you can't? But then they all went into the room, and it took a half an hour. It wasn't momentarily. And in that room, they were told there's 2 vetoes. Huh. So what nobody understood is why they... You see what I mean? It's a great dramatic moment, but that's not how the Security Council works.
But why would they have gone forward?
Why did they go forward? Anyway? I literally...
Maybe just to have China and Russia put their cards on the table as supporting the the Mugabe regime.
But I think this is where, again, people can think differently. The usual analysis is you do that, and sometimes the people do it to the U.S. on Israel, by the way. They call to the floor a resolution they know is going to be vetoed just to have the U.S. stand alone, right?
Yeah.
And they've done it a few other times on other countries, but you do that to isolate the veto giver. Almost by definition, when there's 2, it's not isolated.
It's not isolated.
When you have a friend, you're not isolated. Which is why then they maybe they felt, that the world is ready to say China and Russia are rogues. The thing is that you're not isolating it when you're making it clear not only that there's 2 vetoes, but in the aftermath, talking to a lot of ambassadors, it's not. I don't want to say maybe the world is a corrupt place. Maybe only Europe and the United States know what's right, along with Costa Rica and, ironically, Burkina Faso, which we could talk about. They voted for this. Many people have a lot of they look at aid that's given to them and stuff like that, which I think is kind of demeaning. It's possible that Burkina Faso has what's viewed as a pro-Western or maybe a pro-human rights foreign policy. It's okay. But it is a lot of the countries. Actually, here's just a funny quote that the ambassador of Sudan, for all of his various chicanery, said after the vote that he's no longer in favor of Security Council reform, i.e., putting more developing countries on the Security Council because of Burkina Faso's vote. He said it's better to just stick with the P5 and their veto. Quote, it's better to deal with the devil than his disciples. Which I'm not vouching for it. I'm just saying it was sort of funny. But
that's a good line.
It's a good line. It's just a line. Yeah. I mean, and that's the UN is sort of amoral in that way. Like, I mean, it's a good line. I don't know if it, but it is interesting in the sense like you'd think, people. I think within the African Union, people are saying again, countries are free to vote their conscience. The one thing I think people may miss, and I've read a lot of the. What's interesting to me, actually, I bet you on this one, Mark, you're on the side. I don't think between you and Claudia Rosette, or you and the New York Sun, or you and the National Review, there's going to be an inch of difference. You both agree Mugabe sucks, and this should have gone through.
Yes, sign me up.
No, exactly. So it's always interesting to me to see.
Eli Lake and I will march with a placard.
We
can
go
street
further right. We can go further. Having mixed it up with Eli Lake, there's a lot further right wingers than there, and you're with them.
Yeah.
Mark. I'm going to go not left. I'm going to go rogue-like on this one.
Okay.
Not and say I'm by no means pro-Mugabe, but I don't think that. I mean, if look, you criticize John Bolton because you say he was just a bull in a china shop. He didn't engage in diplomacy. That's not how you'd play it. I mean, you don't like his politics either, but the critique of him is he didn't play well with others. But on this one,
my critique of him that he was ineffective at his job.
Okay, well, was Delman Khalil's that effective on this vote?
No,
the job
really
was to win the vote. And the job was, if you couldn't win the vote, to hide that. Here's what they should have done. Back to strategy.
Yeah.
If it was going to be double vetoed, and also in the aftermath make it clear, and I think it has made it clear, that 50% or more of countries in the United Nations didn't side with this sanctions resolution for a variety of reasons. If you were going, the move would have been to withdraw the resolution, say, we're not having a vote because we've decided, based on the sleaziness of China and Russia, that's the subtext, to wait and see if the Mugabe-Tsvangirai talks bear fruit. We're waiting. We're going to hold this resolution over the process as a threat. And then, if anything good happened, they could have said, you see, just by bringing the resolution forward, even though we never pushed a vote, we brought something to happen. Instead, they went for broke. They lost. I would say it makes it less likely that Mugabe talks to anyone, right?
Probably.
He's won. That's their position is they won. They won. It's over. See?
Well, what are the next steps?
There's very few next steps. I just was. I mean, in terms of I think that the call of the I'll put it the New York Suns of the world, not our mutual friend, but is that Ban Ki-moon should nevertheless go forward and name a special representative. That was one of the parts that was one of the elements of the resolution. It wasn't just sanctions and an arms embargo. It was that, and sort of because Mbeki is perceived, not perceived. He is. He's totally in the bag with Mugabe. They take photos with them shaking hands and holding hands. I mean, that's pretty clear. But that the Secretary General should nonetheless, even though he now doesn't have the approval of the Security Council, name a special representative to somehow be a co-equal with Mbeki in trying to negotiate. I actually think by having held the vote and having it play out the way it did, even though he'd like to do it, I mean, on this one, Ban Ki-moon he's on the side of the angels on the one hand, or he's on the side of the U.S., however you want to view it. But whereas in other situations he's gone out of his way not to be critical of dictators around the world, in this case he's on fire. He's said that Mugabe may not be the legitimate leader. When the ambassador of Zimbabwe, this is a kind of a sidebar, but I think it's important. The ambassador of Zimbabwe came out after the vote on Friday and said, people may have seen him on TV. He's a very kind of personable guy. I'm not sure he even believes what he's saying. This is his job. But one of the things that he said was that he doesn't think that the UN Secretariat can be impartial in this matter. That every report they've put out has only criticized the government and nothing about the opposition, it raises questions about the impartiality of the Secretariat. Nobody thought. I mean, it was a kind of a harsh critique, but that happens here all the time. Over the weekend, Ban Ki-moon's office put out a statement. We are deeply concerned with the highly inappropriate comments of the Perm Rep of Zimbabwe. And then it has 2 paragraphs saying, because we've tried to do everything on Zimbabwe, etc. But it seemed very strange that not strange, I mean, maybe it doesn't seem strange to anyone, but I would say that usually the member state criticizes the Secretariat, they just let it go. Right? Mm-hmm. In fact, even just a week ago, the Russian ambassador, Churkin, said Ban Ki-moon has broken the law by turning over the UN mission in Kosovo to the European Union. And I even asked the spokesman for Ban any response to being called a lawbreaker by Russia. No, he's entitled to his opinion. So then, I mean, and this is getting...
Well, I mean, this goes back to the whole point. You know, there's some countries are more equal than others at the UN, right?
But this makes it obvious. It makes it blatant.
You can criticize a sort of international pariah like Mugabe sort of with greater sort of confidence and ease than you can a member of the Permanent Five.
But that's it. Well, yeah, I don't even think the pariah thing is important.
Someone who can control whether or not you get appointed to a second term.
Right.
You know, it's sort of like the nature of things. I don't know why you seem shocked by this.
No, I because it was so blatant. I literally was doing something entirely different on a Saturday, and somebody says, "Have you seen this statement?" And it was like no one could believe it. I mean, some people say Ban was actually maybe have already been traveling to France for Bastille Day. I mean, who knows? He must give his approval to these things, but it looked so. It almost proved the point. In fact, I mean, not to be. I guess I want to say is, and this you may think that this is far too kind of going native here, but it is. This wasn't effective. I guess I'd ask you to reflect on this. If John Bolton wasn't effective because he wasn't effective, he wasn't an effective diplomat. I have to say, there's almost no way to portray the Zimbabwe thing as effective diplomacy. Not that. The U.S., the UK, and France can't make the world better.
The evidence is there that it was ineffective, right? I think having a double veto means, when you're sponsoring the resolution means that, you failed in a way, and that's too bad. I think, part of it, I don't know about I don't know how much is sort of the person of Zalmay Khalilzad to blame, but I think rather it's sort of maybe American foreign policy apparatus, in general, it didn't make the Zimbabwe issue perhaps a high enough priority with its sort of bilateral relations with Russia, to say, listen, this is like the most important thing in the world to us, that you go along with this. Because frankly, it isn't. It's like a second-tier issue. So at the end of the day, we'd rather have Russia on our side when it comes to Iranian nuke talks than it would Zimbabwe.
No, you're dead. But there's also, I think when you start adding up the conflicts between the U.S. and Russia, they really start adding up. First of all, there was the total Kosovo blow-off of the Russian/Serbian position. Then you have the missile shield, which is, although it doesn't come up here at the UN, it's really, they've drawn a line in the sand. Basically, you have the U.S. running around, offering aid to Poland to slip it in there, Czech Republic, you know what I mean? And
it's almost like we're surprised when Russia doesn't go along with our sort of second-tier foreign policy priorities when we spent the last year poking them in the eye. With various, with like the missile system, with sort of missile defense, and Kosovo and other issues.
And the other issue is Georgia.
It's one of the. I think it's probably a hallmark of the current administration, the Bush administration, that they think that they can just sort of stake a maximalist approach on every single issue, and huff and puff if they don't get their way. There are trade-offs, and they don't seem to appreciate that. Or at least engage in that at all.
No, definitely. There's, the other issue between them, that actually is a live issue here, is Georgia, where things are really the two breakaway republics have sealed their border essentially with Georgia. Russia's overflying with planes. The Georgians are threatening to go in. It's really there's going to be things are heating up there, and I think that all of these things are interrelated. But here's something I want to ask you.
Okay.
All right.
Shoot.
Because I think
I'm bracing myself.
No. It's
okay.
If you were to find that in responding to Cyclone Nargis hitting Myanmar, and not only then, but we'll just focus on that in getting the aid into the country, that the UN acquiesced to exchange its currency with the government through something called the Myanmar Foreign Trade Bank from dollars into something called foreign exchange certificates at a rate set entirely by the government, and that through that, much of the value of the aid was lost. What would you say about that?
I would say that it's often that sort of first of all, it's the way you set it up. It's clearly a problem, but at the same time, how else do you purchase things locally without converting your currency into local?
You could buy. People are able to convert. Go on. I'm sorry.
I mean, this is sort of what happened in North Korea, right? This is that sort of UN agencies wanted to, needed to pay rent, frankly, and they needed to use local currency to pay the rent. So they need to convert that local currency at local banks. I mean, it's sort of like what embassies all around the world do as well.
They're told there's a single bank, and it's the government's rate. I guess what I'm saying...
In a place like Myanmar, I don't doubt that there's a bank with,
No, but there are people you can convert. For example, I've learned that NGOs, in order to not be viewed as... One, to not waste their money, but two, not be viewed as supporting the Tan Shui government of Myanmar, use a system that's known as hawala, which is it's sort of informal money wiring, where you go to a storefront in Bangkok, and you deposit dollars, and mysteriously in a storefront in Yangon, you can withdraw Myanmarese kyat. And
somehow
it can
I
be
don't
done.
think that
the UN wouldn't do that.
Yeah, is that a public organization could really do that.
But I guess here's the thing. When asked about this, the UN said, we're not losing any money at all. And it's viewed. The reason I wanted to ask you is it's kind of a litmus, not a litmus test. I think it's viewed as because of the North Korea situation, it's viewed as kind of a right-wing issue to ask how is the money being converted. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I think it's viewed as like, it's looking for scandal. It's like that North Korea thing, and it's like, what if the UN, Robert Mugabe, for example, just for the record, I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's horrendous inflation, etc. I'm not sure if UN programs in Zimbabwe all have to convert government money with him such that a cut is being taken by the government. And I think if there were, you might have a problem with it. No?
Right. It's the same. I mean, it's the same. Like I said, it's probably the same thing that foreign embassies have to do. Right. I mean, somehow they need to convert euros or Australian dollars into the local currency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a place that's like kind of like a dictatorial place, that means sort of the central bank, right? I mean, it's sort of what foreigners have to do to operate.
But one difference I'd raise is that a country having an embassy, whether it's in Yangon or Harare, the country does what it has to do because it sees it as important to have a representative there, right? In the case of the UN in Myanmar,
they do it because they think it's important to,
No, I'm sorry.
Services
you
ground,
hear how this works. They're squawking some. No, but
okay.
Here, in the case of Myanmar, they went to the public and to member states, and they said, "Give us this money." They gave a very thick, appeal, flash appeal, and they said, "Here's all the projects." Nowhere in it did it say, 10, 20% of what you give is going to go straight to Tan Shui. They didn't say that. Now, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe that was understood. I don't think it was understood.
I don't know. I assume that donor states know how these kind of things operate. I don't know what kind of... it's hard for me to sort of judge what they were thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think, should whatever the situation was ultimately be disclosed? Or is it sort of one of these things that's better left unstated?
Again, what's the alternative, right? Having sort of this
good. I'm glad we're back on track. There is an alternative. Are you ready? This is what I thought. Again, as a overheated in a pundit moment, it struck me that all of that focus that was brought to bear after the cyclone to say you must let in, Doctors Without Borders, European aid workers must be let into the Delta, which I don't disagree with. But there was a lot, right? There was talk of invading the country to get the aid workers in, right? The whole focus was on that. It seemed to me, I've asked John Holmes, is the head humanitarian, and he, it would seem fair to say to the government, this is important. At least, particularly after an emergency, you need to waive custom fees. There are various requests that the UN makes in other contexts to say for purposes of humanitarian aid, no tax, for example, or right? And I don't think there was not a word, not a peep was said. Let's drop the foreign currency exchange scam in the wake of the hurricane. Yeah. But that might have actually been a more important request than to let in particular nationalities of aid workers. I don't know.
True, but if you were like sort of go back to that time, the problem was that for so long after the hurricane, they just weren't budging, right? They just weren't budging from their position. Mm-hmm. They were not letting foreign aid workers in the country. People were dying. I think the situation sort of necessitated, frankly, that to the extent that this can be considered buying off the government to give internationals access to helpless civilians. Mm-hmm. Maybe sort of a 20% cut is sort of what's worth it.
Right, but I guess what. To me, for some reason, I think factually it's important. Basically, like people have come forward with minutes of calls on which this is all disclosed, but none of it publicly. First they deny it, then they say again, maybe this was always known to be going on. Let's leave it alone. But I think for some reason, I have a sense that it sort of depends on which dictator you're dealing with. I mean, I don't know. A work plan now is to go down the line and see what are the countries in which the UN accepts? Because I mean, every country has a central bank, but not every country says you must convert your currency with us. And I've seen.
I would be very curious. I'm sure viewers would too. Sure. If you came back to us with that.
One of the minutes say that although the going rate in the street is $1 to 1,100 kyats, KYAT, that the government was saying they wanted to give 6 to 1. And it's not, from the minutes, it's not clear what the ultimate number was, but the number was not 1,100, And again, I guess I do feel, in a sense, that it should be disclosed. Maybe it's a little bit naive, but I think that I don't think people I think it's important, you have to disclose, particularly if it's not just that the money is not going to aid starving people, it's that it's arguably it's going to the very same government that's part of the problem. Right? I don't know.
Well,
that's a little too hypothetical at this point.
That's good. With that, Matthew,
okay.
Maybe we wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up. We can wrap it up.
All right. Good talking to you as always.